Hello there. Grown conversation about the desecration of Mother Emanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church. I was asked to do this conversation at the request of fellow Black woman content creator Shantae Charles. Black Table Talk and Daring Dialogues. Show so hot about Black history that Facebook and YouTube won't always let her share. So I have decided to take this up because we have a very disturbing incident took place in the last 2 weeks, and Joe Biden and the pro-Palestinian protesters are actually the accessories, not the actual people that allowed the crime to happen, that took place in it. I've been talking for a little while, ever since the video with TD Jakes allowing himself to be seen potentially massaging somewhere close to the middle of his leg in his pocket on camera to a man twerking. That if we as Black people do not hold sacred what we need to hold sacred, no one else will. And as a civilization, if you consider yourself that, you're done. You're done. It's just not, you're finished. So let me just recap what I'm talking to, and then I'm going to unpeel these layers for you. What I'm referring to is there was an incident when President Joe Biden had gone to speak at Emanuel AME of Charleston, South Carolina. And I need y'all to understand something, okay? Politicians and churches. It's 2024, y'all. Y'all notice that American politicians don't pay the least bit of attention to the Black church except when they want something in an election year? Democrats in particular. Y'all notice? Y'all notice that? I mean, those of you who are, well, I'm 43 as of today, but those of you who are at least 40 should have seen this a couple times already. Your needs are ignored all that time until somebody wants something. We'll come back to the content of Joe Biden's character in a little while. So he goes to Mother Emanuel. Now, before I go into the history of Mother Emanuel, I'm going to put the website for the church and its history in the description of this video. I need you to understand a conflation of two very important ideas. First of all, Emmanuel. That's another name for Jesus Christ. And for a group of Black people, the AME Church begins here. And I have it here to make sure that I get it all in line. Richard Allen was doing his best to be a perfectly good Methodist. Rapacious white church folk, yeah, I said that. I did not say Christians, because nothing in Christianity allows you to take someone of a different color and treat them differently because of it, because you want to hold people in slavery. And understand that the North, Philadelphia, where this starts, is right next door to the second biggest slave state in the Union, New York, not in the South, in the North. Northern slavery was on and popping in 1787. And across the entire United States, the Anglo-Saxon racial view that no one else has a history worth respecting and everyone else who is not Northern European is various degrees of inhuman and chattel. If you talk to even the Irish next door or the Italians and Southern Europeans and Central Europeans, you will find out that they can tell you similar stories. But Richard Allen, being a Black man, was getting this in the teeth. Now, next door, James Barrick, a pastor who would become part of the AME Church, would do a great deal of work with a whole bunch of unnamed Black women who we should mention because we know who dominates the church. Put in 50 years and got slavery stopped by July 4th, 1827. But the reason that this all popped off is because Richard Allen was being mistreated in the church he was in. And so him being mistreated, long story short, he said, okay, y'all don't want us to worship with you, that's fine. He probably didn't say y'all because he was in Philadelphia. You all don't want us to worship with you, that's fine. Okay, I'll buy a place and we'll just worship as Methodists ourselves. Well, when that happened, the same organization, the Methodist Church, full of rapacious white church folks, still want to have control. So you can't worship with us. We'll not accord you any rights, and you can't worship without us because we're going to interfere in your worship. So he founded the African Methodist Episcopal Church in 1816. At about that same time, in Charleston, Morris Brown comes out with about 1,000 people of churches where they were being mistreated because suddenly an alternative exists. So what I need you to understand about the founding of the African Methodist Episcopal Church is that it is founded as a refuge for Black Christians who are not able, because of rapacious white church folk. This is nothing new that we're dealing with right now. To even be able to worship in peace, they have to be treated like chattel, even in the worship service. And I can tell you, having read the Bible, that God is no respecter of persons. I can tell you that in God, in Christ, there's neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free. I can tell you where the Bible has curses, James 5, on men who have other men work their fields and hold back their wages. But rapacious white church folk caused these two men to come out from among them. And of course, the scripture says, "Come out from among them and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and I will receive you as sons and daughters." And he did. So, in 1818, the free church that was founded in Charleston connected itself to African Methodist Episcopal. And eventually, this becomes Mother Emanuel. Now, let's come back to Emanuel. When these people name that church Emanuel, I need you to understand something, okay? Because rapacious white church folk think they have a monopoly on God. So a Black church daring to name itself Emanuel, Emanuel means God with us. In other words, God is with us and we don't even need you and you ain't it. And then you add mother, because this is the first of the AME churches by history. There was a lot of little church congregations in that area. But this becomes the first of the AMEs. The other thing you need to understand is in the Black world, mother means something very different in the African world than it does in other places. Confidence with Love will tell you she's doing some videos about the worship of the great Black mother. And in fact, all the way back to Semiramis, the Black woman has been worshipped as mother god for eons almost. It's almost, if you track where that would have started, that would have been Nimrod's wife and or mother, also known as Marduk. So we're back almost at the dawn of time at this point. Now, I don't endorse that worship, but the point is, in the African world, being a mother is very much different. There's more to that, even among African Americans, because we retain that ancient memory. I don't endorse it, of course, but Mother Emanuel, for a African body, even African American, that's a very powerful conflation of things, because there's two things you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to blaspheme. There you have Christ, Emmanuel, who is God. And then you don't let anybody mess with your mom. So that's your setup, okay? Let's now go a little bit further. A man named Denmark Vesey was brought into this area as a slave, but obtained his freedom. He put together an elaborate slave revolt in this area. Note, he was betrayed by a house slave to the house slave master. And in reprisal for the slave revolt that actually never happened, that didn't quite get off, hangings, destruction of the church, more just because we're not talking about the same site that Mother Emanuel is on today, but the destruction of the church, hanging of the members, even more stripping of rights. And understand, slavery is still going on. So you have even more stripping of rights that goes on for the few free remaining. This is so bad that the whole AME Church has to go back underground. Some go back to the churches with the same people that have done this with them because they have a need to be in church. And others met secretly. See, side note to side note, when the United States wants to say it never persecuted Christians, wants to talk about how Roman martyrs during the Roman period, whom they imagine ought to be white, had to worship in catacombs. No, we got African Americans having to worship in secret all across the first 246 years. And the latest African American church burnings are as late as 2023. When people tell you the United States doesn't persecute Christians, they're lying. When certain people think that they are being persecuted because they can't actually go out and just impose their stuff on everybody else. And some of them are out here giving interviews talking about, yeah, I'm actually talking to my fellow white evangelicals, and they're saying Jesus is not enough. And when they get pushback, that's not persecution. No, we have people who were not necessarily even involved in this particular slave revolt being forced not to worship, having their churches burned. As Shante Charles said, this site, although it's not the same building, that building was not purchased till 1865, but we'll come back to its desecration later. This history should be held as carefully by us as African Americans as Auschwitz is carried by the Jews. Because the only crime here was to attempt to be free. Now, Christians will go back and forth about both Nat Turner and Denmark Vesey. And all I have to say about this is as follows. If you have a whole society and half of those Christians think, more than half, think that they can just use other people to channel, like they never turned a page and found out how masters were supposed to treat their slaves in both Ephesians and Colossians. So you're going to just sin against God like that against your brothers. You're going to risk those curses in James 5. Well, if you can't come to terms with that, you need to take the plank out of your own eye before you try to pull the speck out of Nat Turner and Denmark Vesey's eye. The Bible also very clearly says, okay, if you abide in the calling where you're called, it's in Romans chapter 7. But if you may be free, use that instead. The slave is the only person in the scripture, actually, and you'll find this in not Romans 7, but 1 Corinthians 7, who is given permission to change his condition. Make of that what you will. But I would say that history stands more on the side of Nat Turner and Denmark Vesey on that subject. You can read that in Romans 7, 1 Corinthians 7 for yourself. That's that same passage of scripture that also releases women from thinking their Christian duty is to get married. No, because that same chapter says it's actually better for both men and women as Christians to remain single. Same passage frees a whole lot of folk. 1 Corinthians 7. The slave is the only person given, okay, if you're called in slavery and you can serve the Lord in slavery, do that. But if you can get free, you can use that too. That's in the book. Don't be mad at Denmark Vesey. He was looking at the only way he had available. And it failed because someone else wanted the benefits of being in a master's house. We'll come back to that shortly. In 1865, the present place where Emanuel AME sits was purchased. Meanwhile, the new bishop, Bishop Payne, comes back. He was exiled from the state, from the city at least, for forming a school. He comes back 30 years later and organizes it. So again, rapacious white church folks, because again, these people do not know Christ. Sorry, we're not going to even play that. No. Are holding African Americans to an extent that they cannot even read the Bible. And British missionaries by this time have passed on a Bible that has 90% of the Old Testament, 50% of the New Testament removed. So even if you could read it, that Bible, you couldn't turn the page. But we expect that the local white population has a full-length Bible. So all they had to do was turn the page and then they slammed it shut. Can't even have a school. We know that Black people being able to read was outlawed during slavery. We get that. But no, again, these supposed to be Christian people. Don't you believe it? Fast forward. But what I want you to get here is that Mother Emanuel has a history of coming out of the AME Church, which is a refuge for Black people, just seeking to get together and worship the Lord. And now is a place where Black people wanted to take extreme measures, but that was what was necessary for them in order to obtain their freedom. They were betrayed by a fellow Black person. And this became the first time that Mother Emanuel and its members were desecrated and savaged. Dylan Roof rolls up 150 years later from 1865, which is when Mother Emanuel was restarted. Got in there, joined the Bible study, took this 150th year to do terrorism. Killed a whole bunch of people. This is the second time. So we got to knock off church. We don't know anymore. Just rapacious folk continue the legacy of defiling this place with their violence because they got a problem with Black people being free. 2015, not 1815, not 1835, no, 2015. And as I said, you can find African American church burnings down to 2023. We just 2 weeks into 2024. So I laid out all this history because it's necessary for you to have an understanding. It's Martin Luther King Day. I hope you took time to listen to it. But if you do not have churches like this, Dr. Martin Luther King does not have a full background to come from, although, of course, he is a Baptist minister. But it's important that these other ministers have actually stood up and did work because that's the history that Dr. Martin Luther King is going to draw on. So then, because remember I said there was a particular house slave who was very interested in the benefits he would have in staying in his master's house more so than taking a chance on freedom. A couple of weeks ago, whoever it is making decisions at Mother Emanuel AME opened the door to desecrate the house again. Because what you don't do is let unrepentant segregationists up in your pulpit to shield for their upcoming presidential runs. But I want you to understand what I just said first. The United States government has only done things materially for Black people when it was necessary for its own survival. Black women were only imported in mass because the slave trade was going to stop in 1808. The British Empire was turning against it. And so Black women were brought into the country solely to breed a new slave force and to keep it going in perpetuity. The United States has never, and of course, now we're talking about the United States. We're not talking about the British colonies. But the British colonies never saw us as anything but labor. Again, we see this from the church behavior. People do not become different people for 4 hours on Sunday. You can hand them a Bible and dress them in a suit all you want. If you are a rapacious, chattel-making white person of that time period, that's who you were. That's about a quarter of every white person's ancestors in the country, by the way. A quarter. We have a lot of immigration. There's a lot of white people who came here who had nothing to do with that directly. It needs to be said. But what you get judged on is what you choose to identify with. So I have respect for every white person who is walking against this rapacious history. I do, because you look at the legacy honestly and you choose whether you're going to do good or evil. And if you name the name of Christ, you better get your life together. He gonna come get you. That's a different video. Because all you gotta do is ask the youngest son of Light Horse Harry Lee, how that happens. Robert could tell you it may take a little while, but Jesus gonna come get you and snatch everything you had. Because in James 5, that's what he said he was gonna do. Side note. Meanwhile, Joseph Robinette Biden, 46th president of the United States, is a segregationalist trained by segregationalists Strom Thurmond and Jesse Helms. You remember Strom Thurmond, the man it took almost to 100 years for him to acknowledged the daughter that he essentially SA'd out of a survey made. And so again, we're still not talking about the 19th century. Now we're in the 20th. You know, people who walked around with Robert Byrd, who was at least in the running to be alleged to be a Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. You know, the United States' oldest terrorist organization, although Lyndon Johnson went on to let them get a 501c3, but then we've already been spent a lot of time talking about rapacious religious folk, haven't we? And by the way, Lyndon Johnson was no good either, but here's what happened though. Exigencies. Abraham Lincoln said, I would prefer to save the Union and leave people in slavery because I'm married to a slave owner's daughter and I want to inherit. When you get trounced by Robert E. Lee, who said, I would prefer to free every slave than do the Civil War, that's not what you call a progressive president of the United States. It's not. That ain't it, y'all. No, that's not a progressive president. That's actually embarrassing. And then we have Lyndon Johnson, owing to the assassination of Southern white folks. They didn't directly, but John F. Kennedy told, don't go to Dallas. We're not sure we can protect you. That's how inimical. Now you got to consider who John F. Kennedy is and what he's doing in the world in terms of foreign policy. It makes no difference. The idea that he was talking to Martin Luther King was enough to have his life threatened. Now, how he was assassinated and why is more complex than that. But Garfield in the previous century, same thing, was targeted because of that. Now, they say it was an anarchist, but General Grant, who had been president before Garfield, cried because he knew exactly what was going on. You cannot even, President Obama could not even take tours south because they knew they couldn't protect him. Y'all can look this up. Barack Obama has more death threats than any president in history over that same time span. And guess where a lot of those came from? So, but during this time, Strom Thurmond, Jesse Helms, Robert Byrd are the Dixiecrat wing. And they are doing everything they can, but Lyndon Johnson outmaneuvered them because it was expedient. John F. Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson had the same problem. You could not promote the United States as a beacon of freedom when people in China and Russia could see on television people taking dogs and water hoses on Black women and children. Maybe Black men they could have gotten away with. But see, most people, most communities, heads up, different video, most men have a problem with, who consider themselves moral men, have a problem with that. So they realized other countries are looking at this. We're not going to be able to say our capitalism is an alternative if this stays on the screen. We're going to have to do something about this. Lyndon Johnson was no angel, nor was he no friend, because what he gave in one hand, he figured out how to give back in another with the Great Society. That's too long a video. But all these Southern men had absolutely no love. And their last protege in power, their second to last protege, was a gentleman named Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, who was Attorney General not that many years ago. So when you hear him talking about caging and sterilizing people and being surprised that Christian people had a problem with it, this is because, again, there's a long history of rapacious white church folk. That's why he was surprised. But he did a crime bill with a man named Joseph Robinette Biden. Joe Biden opposed Black children having access to schools, even though that was decided in 1954. He opposed busing. He designed a crime bill with his good friend, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, that put separate and unequal back under the law. So you use cocaine. If it's in powder form, you get one sentence. If it's in crack cocaine, you get another sentence. And he said on the Senate floor, if you need to find that video, you can. This is to keep their sons from taking on our sons. It had nothing to do with fairness under the law. And it had to do with the same old Jim Crow. That's what that was. This is a segregationist. And people are like, well, he admitted he was wrong. No. You don't mess up 30 years of a community. See, Joe Biden must have, if he has a conscience at all, and we'll come back to that, it must gall him to see Black men my age doing powerful things in this country while his good son has passed away. Beau Biden gave his life for his country. We're not mad at him. And Hunter can't get out of trouble. And why did Hunter get into trouble? Drug use. And his daddy, who said, I'm setting up a law to protect Hunter and to put Tariq in jail, can't do nothing about it. As president, imagine how much less protection Joe Biden will be able to give his family as a former president. Now, I'm not talking about what y'all do in November of this year. I'm just talking about there is no way that this man, and we just talking about his past, people want to be mad at Donald Trump and would never let him into the pulpit. Joe Biden's political career is 50 years. He spent almost all of it being the lackey of Jesse Helms, Strom Thurmond, and the Dixiecrats. He is the reason Clarence Thomas is on the bench, y'all, because he did his level-headed best to keep Anita Hill and 3 more women that had the same testimony. See, if you had listened to Black women, but Joe Biden is the man who made sure that you would never hear the other testimony. That's our sitting president. And he can be the sitting president as long as people in the country think he should remain in office. That's his past. Let's just talk about his recent past. This man dares to say that he can define our Blackness based on whether we voted for him. If you didn't vote for me, you ain't Black. I have news for y'all. It's probably a good time for me to say this. I didn't vote for Donald Trump, but I didn't vote for Joe Biden either, and I'm still Black. In California, Donald Trump wasn't going to carry the state. Learn about the Electoral College and go about your business. Really. Because I could not vote for either man because I know their history all too well. Donald Trump has been acting a fool for about 12 years. Joe Biden has been acting a fool for 50. Now, that has nothing to do with what you do in November because Joe Biden is a more capable president than Donald Trump was and can be. That's a whole different conversation between those two old rapacious men, but only one of them is supposed to be an Irish Catholic. Remember, we talked about the rapacious white church folk back in the past? That's who the people at Mother Emanuel, the church that was betrayed by the house slave that was more interested in the benefits in the master's house than freedom, led up into their pulpit to shield for his upcoming 2024 reelection. The only place that Joseph Robinette Biden should be in a Black church is sitting on whatever the Methodist church equivalent to a mourner's bench is. Because when you repent, you change stuff. You author law that repairs what has been done in the community for the last 30 years. And I know I have a lot of people on this channel that's like, well, Black men belong in jail. When you have a situation where a third of the community is felons, you ought to at least look twice at that. Because you have a whole bunch of other felons over here who are short in short terms and getting help, getting work back in the community. And you have one group of people over here that is not getting any kind of support like that, so that even if there was a possibility for change, the way is almost blocked. I'm not talking about sympathy. I mean, when you see numbers like that are that out of order, yes, go Google it. 33%. There's numbers as low as 30 and other numbers as high as 38% of Black men are convicted felons. When someone stays out of the work market for 20 to 30 years on a crack cocaine, the whole economy has changed. Have y'all not noticed that there's computers in this? All this stuff. These men would have come out with no skills that fit in a modern economy. Whereas Hunter Biden's group of men stays in for about 5 and does not lose that time and so can bounce back and start their families. This is no excuse. But it is a fact that Joe Biden set this up. And he set that up for every Black daughter, mother, wife, mother of children. It's hard not to be a single. I know people who are single mothers because their husbands are incarcerated. And they're going to be incarcerated on long terms that white men under that law are not getting. Now, there has been some reform. We get that. But there has not been repentance, because if Joe Biden cared about it, he would have made that a hallmark of things he was going to change. I have nothing against my students who are now college age getting forgiven for their student loans. I think that There's something that can be done with that too. But if a man has sinned to that extent against a whole generation of millions of people, if he was repentant, he would have done more to fix it. He is not. He still defines our existence based on what we do for him. When you have Joe Biden as president, because Donald Trump's family was in Austria, well, was it Germany or Austria? Drumpf. It's a good, solid German name. They were somewhere between Germany and Austria where all this stuff is going on with Mother Emanuel. He does not have the long history. He does not have the long history in politics. Yes, he's sitting up there giving aid and cover to people like Joe Biden by attempting to get the Central Park Five convicted, the exonerated five, because we now know they were innocent after having taken 20 or 30 years of their lives. But he was not in a position to do the damage. He does not have the background. Remember what I said about 1 in 4? 1 in 4 of most white people's ancestors in this country is German. And so that group does not have the long history of oppression. It just doesn't. So you got to take Joe Biden for who he is. This is why a lot of people won't vote for him. Because if you know, you know. Should have been on a mourner's bench. Should have spent a lot more time in the last 2 years reforming criminal justice if he was serious. He is not. He still defines Black people only by being good chattel to him and Democrats. Should not have been allowed access to any pulpit. But again, the desecration of Mother Emanuel happens because someone inside interested in the benefits in Joe Biden's White House let him in. Mother Emanuel has a fundraising project going on. It's doing some updates. See, Shantae, this is the part I really didn't want to get into. But see, I'm a professional journalist. And what I did learn from the investigation of Richard Nixon is follow the money. It's been going by a slow, careful path. It looks like somebody might be impatient. It has a separate 501c3. Do you know who controls that branch of the government? Joseph Robinette Biden does. It's in the executive branch. It's part of the Internal Revenue Service of the IRS. I will say this about the pro-Palestinian supporters. They're probably very young relative to Joe Biden and probably even relative to me. Pardon me, y'all. The phone is ringing. Be right back. The protesters. Shantae Charles and I talked about this. Because of the First Amendment, and I will say this for Joe Biden, he knows the Constitution very well. Because people have a right to petition their government, they have a right to be there. And in fairness to Joe Biden, we do not know and will never know if he had time to acknowledge the history of Mother Emanuel completely, because he was cut off. We don't know. And also to Joe Biden's credit, he did not order the protest to be shut down brutally, because his predecessor might have. And there have been other presidents in American history who also might have. Richard Nixon comes to mind. So I'm gonna give him that. Okay, I tried very hard to be fair. But here is where the final desecration occurs. So already you have a segregationist in the last of the segregationists in power in pulpit, allowing him to shield for his reelection campaign without promising anything. Whole another conversation about tangibles. But we don't know if he would have or not because he was cut off. Be fair. You have these pro-Palestinian protesters who are worried about what's going on half a world away and do not understand how to respect this site where people have already fought for everybody's freedom, and they're just gonna come in there and just do their will. But again, If you, as a Black church body, are going to let a segregationist sit in your pulpit and shill, remember what I said. If we don't hold sacred and holy what we need to hold sacred and holy, nobody else is going to either. Your civilization's gone. Part 3. The response of the people present at the event is not to tell these young people, get a bullhorn. African American churches always have amplification. Is not to do what our ancestors of just the previous 60 years would have been, to start a song until finally these people shut up so that we could have played. Baby, no, you in the wrong place, sweetheart. We don't do that here. You're standing in a place where people fought, and well, okay, not that exact place, but you're standing on it. Well, yeah, actually, I forgot Dylan Roof for a second, where people have fought and died for the right of freedom in this country, baby. We understand where you're coming from, but this is not the right site for that. In the same way that you would not let someone, you think that what is being done in Gaza is unholy. Do you understand the unholiness of what you're doing here? Trampling on our heritage the same way that you think that certain people are trampling on the Palestinians. Do you know where you at, baby? Turn on that application, get the gospel musician on the organ, and play them folks right up out of there. That's what my grandmother would have done. That's what their generation would have done. They do not call the local police and actually ask Joe Biden to do something with Secret Service about, okay, what we're going to have to do is we're going to work together. They're trespassing because, see, the First Amendment stops when you hit local laws. Yes, people have a right to petition the government. They don't have a right to protest. They don't do that. Because, again, we need to what? Protect Mother Emanuel because of the legacy. What's going on 10,000 miles from here is not germane. You don't, again, I best believe Black Lives Matter is never going to protest at Auschwitz. Auschwitz. Never. That's not allowed because people understand you're not going to do this to the Jewish people. Period. We need to have that same, but see, since the walls are down, since you let a segregationist in your pulpit, what you gonna do now? But the worst crime, a crime similar to that house slave that betrayed Denmark Vesey, is that the way that the people decided to respond was to start chanting 4 more years, 4 more years, 4 more years. So you're going to chant a support line for a man who took your father, your brother, your son, had him unjustly judged for the better part of 30 years, was trained by suspected Ku Klux Klan members, and has carried out that program faithfully, and has not undone anything of consequence. This is how you're going to let yourself be known to the public. As Mother Emanuel, from the AME Church, where people have come to be able to worship in peace and not be disrespected and abused in worship or controlled by the people doing it in the Methodist Church. Where the former church building burned, destroyed. People were lynched, hung, whole community shut down for 50 more years, almost, not quite, but close. Had to go underground, came back. Their children, their descendants meet Dylan Roof. And you roll up all that history and you chant 4 more years to the country's last segregationist in power. I say at the end what I said at the beginning. If you do not hold sacred your own things, you will constantly be in a state of being trampled and ground under. Now, Shantae and Charles and I differ slightly theologically. I put a lot more emphasis on the Bible from John 14, from John. Let's just take the book of John forward. I'm very much more a grace believer of the New Testament cut. I do not believe that a building is sacred no matter what happened there. A building is only as sacred as the people in it at the time. Either God comes with them or he doesn't. Now, obviously, God is everywhere at once, so that already tells you that God has not had a location that he has decided to stay in on earth since he decided to take the Shekinah glory up. You'll find that in the book of Ezekiel. And then, since Jesus walked the earth, you'll find the resurrection and the ascension, and at least Acts is good for the ascension. So he has not had residence except as the Holy Spirit in the hearts of people. I don't believe as much in the sacredness of places in that sense. I believe more in the sacredness of people who occupy spaces. Because in the story of Mother Emanuel, you find out that Mother Emanuel's members for a generation worshipped underground, just like slaves had to worship underground. Everywhere that they chose to worship God in spirit and in truth, because John 4:24 says that, is sacred. But in Mother Emanuel, we have a place that we know that this went on. So even though the building itself is not sacred, the history is nonetheless important in the same way that we cannot say Auschwitz is a sacred place, given what was done, the defiling things that were done there, but we hold it in honor because of the history of what a people had to overcome. Mother Emanuel should be held the same way. And there was no sacredness in that building at all because the people were not behaving in a sacred way or even an honorable way. Your pro-Palestinian protesters don't have any sense of the history of this country because, again, you don't defile Mother Emanuel with your demands about something 10,000 miles away when you don't have things. You do not go hard for people here that need you like that. No, we're not doing that. No. If you noticed, I have not discussed that conflict. I got bigger fish to fry right here. I can't do anything about what's going on over there, but pray for it. No American president, no European is going to be able to manage that. That's going to be unmanaged until the Messiah comes. And since Jews, Christians, and Muslims do not agree on who that is, forget it. He will have to come and reveal himself and solve it himself. Forget it. It's not going to happen. So I'm not going to give a whole lot of attention to it. I got problems right here. Making sure the children and elders that I serve have the future that they deserve to have. Because we deserve as much as anybody else in this country, and maybe a little more. Because our ancestors did about 246 years of a little more. Period. Period. Dealing with all kind of rapacious folks that name the name of Christ and would not know how to act like Jesus Christ, and they can open the Bible and read it. And since they can, there's no excuse. Working and slaving and being abused. And then an additional 90 years because men who mentored men that mentored Joe Biden set up Jim Crow and had him there putting out the last of the Jim Crow laws. There's nothing sacred going on in that building. Pro-Palestinian protesters are probably too young to know much better, but they should have gone to the website. Everybody got a cell phone. I'm not trying. Y'all can't even see it on camera. I'm not trying to hear it. You're able to know the history of whatever it is. You can pull your head up out your. Stop dabbing and pull your hair out from under your underarms. All right. I have got to remember, I belong to Jesus Christ. I'm a Sunday school teacher. I couldn't tell you that the way I really wanted to, but stop dabbing. Pull your hair from out from under your underarms. The order isn't working. If they could have just done that and realized where they were, but they were focused on protesting Joe Biden, and I get it. I don't condone it, but I understand we're going to, younger people, you don't get a pass, but be instructed because I didn't spend a lot of time talking about them. I got nothing to say to Joe Biden. According to him, I'm not even black. And even if he runs against Donald Trump, because I live in California, he's not getting my vote. If California gets so in love with Republicans that they need my vote, then Donald Trump will be president. I can't vote for him because I know his whole 50 years of history, and I don't care what anybody has to say about that. It ain't changing over here. Come over here talking 4 more years about Joe Biden, I'm gonna block your butt. Bless block, change the lock. You're gonna be the first person on that series I'm working for. People got blocked. People who go hard for a man that defines their blackness by their vote, you can vote for him. If Donald Trump is running against him, I can see it. But because I understand, just like he talked about, I understand the Constitution, well, so do I. Amendment 12 says I don't have to be bothered. There's an electoral college for that. An old segregationist. Segregationist. I don't know why I want to put another word in there. Congregationalist. Different church word. Because he hadn't apologized for that foolishness he said about trying to define who 50 million people are based on how we voted for him. No, y'all. Y'all see this? Y'all see this? No. I was made black. Like my friend says, look, I've been blessed by the best. I was made a black woman by the creator. I do not answer to Joseph Robinette Biden for who I am. Absolutely not. No. When a man talks like that, he'd have you in slavery now. That makes Donald Trump no better. We ain't talking about him. And then people in there chanting 4 more years. But remember, it was a house slave who betrayed the free man, Denmark Vesey, in 1822, because that person was more interested in what's in the master's house. And the master's house in Joseph Robinette Biden's case includes control of a 501c3. A 501c3 who is trying to raise money to preserve a physical building that is generally conflated as Mother Emanuel AME Church. And for that, they sold the soul of Mother Emanuel. You know, it's a good thing Richard Allen and Morris Brown and was it Alexander Payne? Let me get it right. Yes, Daniel Alexander Payne can't come back. What would they say? If Dr. Martin Luther King could come back today, would have been his 95th birthday? 85th birthday? No, 95th birthday. He was born in 1929. What would he say? He did say before he passed that I believe I may have integrated my people into a burning house. But I don't know what he would do if he would find out that a man who would have resisted him in his youth because of the people who mentored him was allowed in the house that tortured from within. I don't know what he would say about that. Surely he had relationships with people who were no friends. But Dr. Martin Luther King walked as a relationship with a man with power who did not come begging. The SCLC would have been able to lovingly but firmly wrap these young people up protesting for Palestine and be like, y'all, baby, get on mission. We got problems right here. Or go somewhere else. Because we know how to do this better than you do. This is not the video I wanted to do on Martin Luther King Day. It's also my 43rd birthday. This is not how I wanted to start. But as someone who is a Black Christian who also is a church person, who is tired of Black people complaining about white evangelicals and we're not going to protect our sacred stuff, tell you what I'm not going to put up with this year. Anytime I hear a Black person complaining about any other group of Christians, I'm going to need to know your bona fides about how you protect this house. The house that you have, wherever you choose to worship. I'm going to need to know. I'm going to need to know, do you hold Christ in dignity? And after you get that settled, then you probably are not going to have trouble holding the group of people he made you a part of in dignity. But other than that, haven't seen what I've seen. See, rapacious Black church folk are no better. Grubbing, greedy, weak, There's a spiritual that says we want no cowards in our band, and it actually comes from a hymn and was adopted over. No better. They work hand in hand with their white counterparts. I want you to process that. You are no more safe with Black people who think white men are God than you are with white men who think they're God. It's just going to be a different way of going. And for evidence, I present you the long history of Mother Emanuel AME Church, sold out to have a segregationist who just happens to control the IRS in the pulpit, who got what he came for. He got what he came for. He managed to work it so that he got the support he wanted. We'll say that the pro-Palestinian protesters did his bidding. And one wonders even about that, since Joe Biden is a long-term political operator, but we don't know that for certain, so we cannot assert it. It may not have made any difference. I remember when Bill Clinton, former President Bill Clinton, came to Third Baptist Church here in San Francisco. I remember how, because everybody wanted to get their photo op. I was a director of one of the children's choirs that was going to be singing. And they held those babies up and everybody else up for 45 minutes. And because there were so many dignitaries that felt they needed to be close, I was on a cane at the time. You know where I had to go up and sit? Along with a lot of senior citizens? In the balcony. So we're back in the balcony in 2017, maybe 2018. So I was injured in February 2017. So it wouldn't have been maybe late in the year, maybe September 2017. I forget what month it was exactly, but I was on a cane. Myself and a whole bunch of senior citizens are back up in the balcony where they would have been 50, 60 years, so that we could go and give honor to this man who told us as he was there about his uncle, who used to tell the Black people at his general store, hey, I know you ain't got it, but you know what, get what you need, I know you'll pay me back. And this is where that man said he learned how to be kind to Black people. And folks just were so thrilled that he knew how to sing, lift every voice and sing, and could sing it in tune. A point was made about it. The man was almost an hour late and held up everything and he didn't do it. The Black people that wanted photographs with him, the big time important people, you know, the ones that were gonna have the disabled and the seniors having to climb up to the balcony. So I've known this has been bad for a minute. I was so disgusted that afterwards, when the children were given their meal, I walked home. I limped home in the evening. Buses slowed down a lot in the evening, and I was close enough. I knew I could make it. So it must have been September, October, or later that same year. I limped home. I was so angry, I needed to give myself that much exertion, because then I realized that Black people, many Black church folk, want to be enslaved again to white men. They still think a white man is God. Anybody want to do the Bible study on the genealogy of Jesus Christ? I assure you, there's not a drop of Proto-European blood anywhere in his genealogy. Not one. Got some Black mamas, though. At least Hamitic. Okay. But then everybody in the Bible is dark skinned. That's a different Bible study. Every major character, there are no European major characters, and there are no Northern European major characters. They're all Southern Europeans. That's a different Bible study. But a lot of y'all probably did not know that, but that is the case. It's exhausting to consider, though. And I've had that in my mind for almost 7 years now, for this January 2024. And to have seen it again, but again, The planks of a building are not holy. They can be held in honor because of the good things that have done there, but if the people running it desecrate it, then everybody else is going to do either. You got too many church house slaves. And it's time that they get called out too. This is not the kind of video I want to start my 43rd year, nor that I want to put it on Martin Luther King Day. But as Shantae Charles pointed out to me, this is the day where people are going to be taking in Black history and a home and have time to scroll. If you stay to the end, I appreciate it. It was not the easiest. It was not the easiest video to make. It's not the most enjoyable, but you need to be aware, and you need to be aware that my tolerance level from year 42 to year 43, which starts today, is a lot lower. Don't bring it around me. Don't bring the Black church slavery around me. I'm not going to deal with that. I'm in a Black church. And if you have been there and seen the community benefit we were able to do yesterday, we know what Dr. Martin Luther King stood for on his better days. There are other days, but we're not going to talk about that now. We know that we were not left here as Christian people, as the pastor said from the pulpit, Pastor Keith L. McNeil, do good to all men, especially those of the household of faith. But let's deal with what the first part of the sentence says first. I was distributing some information. I gave away copies of my books. I ran out. I've got to order new ones. He said, well, I'll be willing to buy it all that. And I said, no, I'll order you a new one. We feed the family, sell to other people. Anybody who was in that church, member or non-member, who got there fast enough. Now, there's a whole different video done about you snooze, you lose. Because I need to alert us something to something in 2024. Ain't nobody gonna bring you nothing but a mess. And I'm gonna have to. I saw something yesterday, and it has to be talked about because it has to be called out because we need to do better. We all need to do better because I saw some things yesterday I hadn't seen before. But at the same time, what we're not gonna do is we're not gonna have house slaves. We're not gonna have house slaves. What does the Bible call them? False shepherds and house slaves. We're not gonna let that pass. No, you about to get called out. So whoever's in leadership with Emanuel who put that together, you consider yourself called out. Yes, I conflated you on purpose with that house slave that turned in Denmark Vesey. Yes, I did. On purpose, I meant that. I did not stutter. In case you did not know, that is what I just called you. You are that level of traitor. If you don't know Joe Biden's history, then you haven't been paying attention. Period. And I'm calling out all of y'all who are like this and your little boule friends, because that was a lot of who was behind Bill Clinton and his being worshipped. You name your church. Look, in Emanuel AME's case, this is really bad. What's the name of the church? Emanuel. When we talk about God with us, that is not Joseph Robinette Biden. I hope that this is clear. But I guess for some people it wasn't. So you're just gonna blaspheme and desecrate. Okay. But just understand we see you. We see you. And Emanuel will fix that up with you. Trust he will. You gonna put his name on the book? Mm-hmm. As if the plague of the last 4 years that closed down churches and killed bishops along with everybody else was not enough. People still don't get it. All right. Everybody else, get your life together. When you see this stuff in the church, leave. Get out. And I guess I'm saying that to some of the members of Mother Emanuel. You need a refuge. Either you need to be able to sit this down or you need a refuge from there. Because like I said, ain't nothing sacred and holy going on in that building. And see, the difference between me and Shantae Charles is also this. I will tell you in a hot second, abandon the building if the activities there are no longer sacred. It's like when white domestic terrorism attacked a building in Hampstead and the church was forced underground, people were willing to go back to worshiping underground so they could have pure worship. If the building is if the people in the building are defiling it, then you may need to let the building go for a few minutes. You may need to Stop that building from project till you get some people in charge that actually respect the history of the church. You may need to do that. If you're in any other church where they're cool with this, when we have dignitaries speak on the floor at El Bethel. We have two beautiful podiums set up for that. But unless you've been vetted by us, no, you don't. In pulpit, no. My pastor will put a woman preacher up there before he would put a local politician up there. And people have arguments about woman preachers, especially in the Baptist church. But even so, there's a limit. He got to vet you first. You got to at least be sound enough in the faces that you're not teaching segregation from the pulpit. You're not going to get our 501c3. Of course, now, Emanuel AME's 501c3 was never in danger because the man who managed it was in the pulpit. But I'm just saying, no, we happen to know who we worship. And we know who we work for and serve him by serving one another. If you're not in a church like that, leave. If you're not in a church where you have a shepherd that protects the flock from rapacious wolves of the political type as well, leave. In 2024, supporting foolery in church is a 2023 behavior. Leave that back there. All right, this video is probably close to a little over an hour. We may have it on the climb today, depending on. It is very cold today. And me getting out and braving the cold all day may or may not do it. We'll see what happens. If not, I do have another video and I'll pre-record it. And if you see it, just know that I didn't make it out today. I just set this one up for you while I was sitting here. All right. Y'all have a good day now. Goodbye. Thank you for listening. This was a tough one, but happy Martin Luther King Day. Don't forget what he stood for. Don't let Black church people act like house slaves around you. Bye.